The people who affect others the most are never the ones who try to. They are not the ones who chase, not the ones who over-explain, not the ones who make themselves available every single time the phone lights up. The people who leave the deepest emotional footprint are often the people who seem the least emotionally accessible, distant, hard to read, vague with their intentions, and somehow more magnetic because of it. If you have ever found yourself obsessing over someone who gave you almost nothing to hold on to, this episode will change how you see attraction forever. Here is something most people never realize. Attraction is not driven only by what feels good. The most emotionally available person would always win, but they don't, because attraction is also driven by what feels unresolved, and the human brain does not handle incomplete information well at all. Let me show you what is actually happening inside the brain when you become fixated on someone emotionally distant. When a person is warm, consistent, and predictable, the brain begins to relax. Dopamine levels stabilize. The nervous system settles. You feel safe. But when someone is emotionally inconsistent, present one day, cold the next, something different happens. The brain detects a reward prediction error. Your neural system expected emotional continuity, but received withdrawal. And the moment the brain detects a gap between expectation and reality, it releases dopamine. Not because you received something good, but because your brain is now motivated to figure out what happened. This is the same neurological mechanism that keeps people gambling, scrolling, checking their phone obsessively. You are not in love. You are in a dopamine-driven search loop. And the emotionally unavailable person is the slot machine that keeps paying out just enough to keep you pulling the lever. Here is the second layer. Scarcity changes how the brain assigns value. In behavioral economics, this is called the scarcity heuristic. When something feels rare, difficult to obtain, or available only in limited quantities, the brain automatically assigns it higher value. Now apply this to emotional availability. An emotionally unavailable person does not give constant access. They do not make themselves easy to read. They do not offer emotional reassurance freely. And the brain interprets that absence as value, not because the person is actually valuable, but because the brain confuses emotional distance with emotional rarity, and rarity feels valuable. This is why telling someone how much you care can sometimes backfire, not because honesty is bad, but because emotional saturation removes the tension that the brain mistakenly interprets as meaning. Tone, almost philosophical, slower, deeper. Now we arrive at the most dangerous layer, the imagination gap. When someone reveals very little about themselves, the brain does not tolerate the void. Instead, it fills it. And here is where the trouble really begins. Because the brain does not fill the void with neutral information. It fills the void with idealized information. It projects depth where there is silence, mystery where there is avoidance, confidence where there is detachment, soulmate energy where there is emotional immaturity. You are not seeing them clearly. You are seeing a version of them you created in your own mind, because they gave you nothing to correct the image. And the less they give, the more detailed the fantasy becomes. This is why some people feel more connected to someone who barely texts them back than to someone who shows up consistently, because fantasy is always more compelling than reality. But fantasy is also unstable, and eventually, the projection collapses. Watch how quickly this cycle plays out. In real life, someone enters your orbit. They show interest, but not too much. They give attention, but inconsistently. They appear warm, then suddenly cold. Now observe what happens inside you. The first few days, you notice it but don't react. Then the gap widens. The silence grows. Your mind starts scanning. Did I do something wrong? Are they losing interest? Why do I care this much? And suddenly, you are thinking about them more than you thought about anyone in months. Not because they gave you something real, but because their inconsistency activated your brain's pursuit system. And the pursuit feels a lot like attraction, but it is not. It is emotional fixation caused by incomplete data. And if you cannot recognize the difference, you will keep mistaking dysfunctional attachment for genuine connection. Here is the fourth layer. Predictable attention feels safe. Unpredictable attention feels intense. And the brain does not always distinguish between intensity and importance. When someone shows up inconsistently, the brain enters a state of intermittent reinforcement. This is the same reinforcement schedule that creates the most addictive behaviors. Random rewards produce the highest levels of dopamine release, higher than consistent rewards, higher than predictable rewards. This is why a hot and cold dynamic can feel more emotionally consuming than a stable, warm connection. You are not addicted to the person. You are addicted to the uncertainty pattern they create, and your brain keeps chasing the moment when the next reward arrives. That brief moment of warmth, that one message, that flicker of eye contact, and the chase itself feels meaningful. Now let me say something that might challenge what you have been taught. Emotional detachment is not the same as emotional strength, but in a culture that rewards stoicism, independence, and self-containment, detachment looks like strength. Someone who is hard to read appears composed. Someone who withholds appears in control. Someone who does not chase appears self-sufficient. But here is the truth. Emotional unavailability is sometimes a defense mechanism, not a sign of deep inner strength, but a sign of unresolved fear, avoidance of vulnerability, past wounds that were never processed, or simply emotional immaturity that has never been confronted. And confusing avoidance with confidence is one of the most expensive mistakes people make in relationships, because you end up chasing people who cannot meet you, not because they are too powerful, but because they are too wounded to be present. This leads us to the most painful layer. Some people do not become attracted to genuine connection. They become attracted to emotional difficulty. Distance feels like depth. Coldness feels like confidence. Inconsistency feels like excitement. Absence feels like mystery. And slowly, their attraction system becomes calibrated to dysfunction. They start feeling bored with people who are stable, underwhelmed by people who are clear, uninterested in people who are emotionally available, not because those people lack value, but because their nervous system has learned to associate chaos with chemistry. And once that wiring is in place, peace feels empty. But let me be clear, that emptiness is not a sign that you chose wrong. It is a sign that your emotional system needs recalibration. Here's the truth that most relationship advice will not tell you. Emotional unavailability is not mysterious. It is not deep. It is not a sign of someone who is too complex to understand. A person who is hard to reach is simply someone who has not done the internal work to be reachable, and pursuing that person will not unlock them. It will only exhaust you. The fantasy that, if I try harder, they will open up, is one of the most painful traps the human mind can fall into, because it keeps you invested in potential instead of reality. But here is what changes everything. Once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. The moment you realize that uncertainty is not love, that intermittent reinforcement is not connection, that projection is not intimacy, you reclaim your ability to choose differently. You stop being impressed by emotional distance, and you start recognizing that real strength is not about how little you reveal. It is about how willing you are to be seen. So, what do you actually do if you recognize yourself in this pattern? Step 1. Stop interpreting confusion as depth. If someone makes you feel confused about where you stand, do not call it complexity. Call it what it is: incomplete communication. Step 2. Separate intensity from importance. Just because you feel strongly does not mean the situation is meaningful. Addiction also feels intense. That does not make it love. Step 3. Learn to value what is stable. Stability does not feel exciting to a system that is used to chaos. But stability is not boredom. It is safety. And safety is the foundation of real connection. Step 4. Stop filling the silence with fantasy. If someone gives you very little, do not build a story about who they are. Let their absence be information, and act accordingly. Because sometimes, the people who feel most addictive are simply the people who keep your mind searching for emotional certainty. And searching is not the same as finding. Most people spend years chasing people who keep them confused, thinking they are pursuing love, when in reality, they are just trying to resolve an emotional pattern that was never meant to be resolved by someone else. If this episode made you think about someone specific, do not chase them. Chase the answer to why you felt the chase was necessary. Because the person you are really searching for is not unavailable. They are just waiting for you to stop looking in the wrong direction.